Good afternoon, bonjour, kwe kwe, hey. I am speaking to you from Ottawa, Canada, in the unceded territory of Algonquin, Anishinaabe peoples, at a crossroads of exchange for Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. I will be speaking about Pittsburgh in the U.S., which occupies ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Osage, and Shawnee peoples, and like Ottawa, sits at the confluence of three rivers. Miigwech to the first stewards of the lands from whom we still have much to learn, and tak tak to Sebastian for the introduction, and to the conference organizers for the invitation to Sweden. In both the European Union and North America, as little as 1% of the materials reclaimed from construction, renovation, and demolition sites are reused. Instead, the vast majority are recycled or sent to landfill. New building construction consumes up to 50% of all raw materials by volume. Without reuse, the ongoing consumption of raw materials continues. As demolitions that destroy, gut, or skin buildings accelerate, I argue that in addition to reusing whole buildings, we need to engage with alternative actions of building deconstruction, salvage, and reuse. Each stage of taking a building apart to reclaim its materials for reuse has its own players, opportunities, and challenges. Policies requiring deconstruction are emerging, and there's increasing interest in reuse design. My research looks at all these stages, but this paper considers the middle salvage stage, which requires greater attention. This is when materials are sorted, assessed, inventoried, possibly repaired, and hopefully sold for reuse. Without planning this in-between stage, it's difficult to scale up reuse or track material stories. While the salvage industry has been criticized for its limited impact on demolition waste reduction and for just tearing down buildings for their high-value fragments, deconstruction has been condemned for commodifying so-called urban blight while concealing racist programs for demolition. Arguably, an expanded deconstruction and salvage industry can instead function as an increasingly vital component of an urban culture of repair and reuse, creating places that facilitate community access to low-cost and often high-quality materials. Examples of emerging efforts in this direction are worth looking at critically. In the EU, regional platforms like Opalis that showcases multiple materials resellers are an expansion, and there's a lot to learn. But I'm focused here on places and platforms developing parallel objectives, notably for training and employment of trades and designers in historic materials repair and adaptation, and wider public education goals. Construction Junction in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which has existed for 20 years, is a model urban site of materials exchange that also emphasizes partnerships. These enable education and training to support community engagement, skills for those with employment challenges, and gaps in professional development. This line of inquiry connects to the literature of waste landscapes, waste of place, or spectacles of urban waste, such as defined in works by Kevin Lynch, Mira Engler, Will Straw, and others, who examine the impacts of ignoring, transforming, and/or exhibiting waste on the urban environment. In their study of how building materials circulate, the Brussels-based deconstruction and reuse group, Rotor, identified four main categories of salvage business, including profit-based exclusive shops of architectural antiquities, specialist markets focused on a popular material niche, self-builders who trade on a site-by-site basis, and cooperatives engaged in countercultural resistance to consumption. In the U.S., Mira Engler calls the last group urban reuse social programmers, organizations equally focused on the wise use of waste resources, on creating jobs, targeting urban communities with less resources, making the environmental agenda more relevant and less of a luxury. Although reuse centers may not yet have a major impact on the diversion of materials from landfill, they can play important educational roles. This can include building public awareness. Such sites are also important as sites where alternate journeys for material discards are exhibited. Examination of Construction Junction as a site rather than a stockpile also suggests that salvage business classifications may not account for a livelier interplay of values between reused antiques, adapted manufactured products, and their joined roles in the creation of new types of urban places. While known as Steel City, Pittsburgh was equally important in the manufacturing of aluminum, glass, and paint. Steel manufactured in Pittsburgh has been a critical part of the legacy of cities across the continent in skyscrapers, bridges, and more invisible infrastructure. My paper reflects more on the city's materials and environmental history, drawing attention to the junction's reuse of the steel structure that once housed a bus repair garage. With an interest in connecting building materials and urban environmental history, my first visit to Pittsburgh for Build Reuse's Decon and Reuse Conference in October 2019 was most inspiring, as it included a field trip to the junction. The conference was organized by Build Reuse's board president Mike Gable, also founding executive director of Construction Junction, and who accepted to be interviewed twice for my paper. Started in 1999 by the state of Pennsylvania's Resources Council, Construction Junction is one of the oldest approximately 1,500 reuse centers in the U.S. The not-for-profit Center for Salvage and Surplus Building Materials, Appliances, and Furniture is now run by an independent board of governors with up to 33 staff, including a 3-person deconstruction unit. All materials and other secondhand goods are acquired at no cost by donation or through their own generally free pickup and deconstruction services. The Junction's annual sales of around $2.3 million account for up to 90% of their income required to pay for a long-term lease, salaries, and other operating expenses. A major annual fundraising event, which also serves as an opportunity to engage with and expand the community of users, raises the difference. Connecting reuse to making materials more affordable and creating skilled labor are key to the nonprofit organization's work. According to the Junction website, recycling and reuse generate nearly twice as many jobs as disposal per ton of diverted materials. A screenshot shows some of the many partnerships that help support social objectives. A combination of resale, redesign, training, social enterprise, and charity covers a range of economic, cultural, and environmental approaches to reuse. This includes a dedicated job training program carried out in conjunction with Goodwill, employing people with disabilities, and a large reuse laboratory called Project Re that partners with Carnegie Mellon University to educate architects in reuse design and the Pittsburgh Trades Institute to train ex-incarcerated individuals in related trades. Construction Junction also leases spaces to many other organizations created to bring together community needs and reuse, from art supplies to computers and bicycles. Dissociating themselves from junkyards, pawn shops, or flea markets, building materials reuse centers are often called hubs, junctions, societies, and other names indicative of placemaking. Construction Junction's location, site, and building are all considered important in achieving its vision. Reusing an existing building was important, as was the need to be in an older urban neighborhood. The over 9,000 square meter enterprise is in North Point Breeze, a historic area of Pittsburgh, both relatively central and close to highway access. The property comprises a 76-meter-long brick-clad warehouse with a complex roof of skylights, which is perfect for display and workshops. An equally large delivery, parking, and pickup yard bridges older residential areas and light commercial areas. The great scale of building and site provides substantial space for both indoors and out for storage, sorting, and display. The generous areas also facilitate collaboration, providing space for joint activities and subletting to partners. High ceilings and connected open spaces are well exploited. The atmosphere of exchange in the well-lit, oversized building feels as much like a crystal palace as a builder's yard. Integrated among endless rows of doors, toilets, and cabinets, sculptural assemblages made of discards inspire visitors to creative reuse possibilities. Works by local artists remind citizens of Steel City that tin cans are close cousins to steel sinks and beams, helping refocus the values of locally significant materials towards transformative futures. The scale of Construction Junction's operations led to it developing reuse retail. This tablet-based inventory tracking platform fills a critical void in the industry's ability to comprehensively manage donated building materials. The Junction now sells licenses to this system with packages geared to nonprofits. Such tools will allow reuse sellers to produce the data needed for deconstruction, salvage, and reuse policy development. Sites of exchange can be places where historic materials are celebrated or given a new story, fostering the parallel retention and reinvention of values of historic building materials. While some values may be retained as stories, called provenance if this adds to resale value, commodification of materials usually detaches them from earlier pathways. Construction Junction is involved in telling stories and creating communities around shared values of reuse. This includes in very well-developed social media campaigns. An Instagram gallery of reuse projects is generated as part of an annual competition. Some stories also track the deconstruction process and the story of a source building and its ultimate fate. New types of digital inventories combined with the increasing use of social media to facilitate reuse may be one way to address possible losses of meaning. Construction Junction is a unique model with transferable aspects that would be usefully compared with others in the next stages of my work. The intersecting networks of people, places, and building materials relate to overarching questions about circularity and mobility in the urban environment, and the capacity to adapt business models through digital inventories and marketing. Recognizing the specific roles of the actors and organizations in places of material exchange is key to developing comprehensive strategies to sustain and transform values through reuse. As governments consider new circular policies for the construction sectors of waste, this type of model helps explain physical infrastructure and skills training needed to develop repair and reuse activities. Tak tak for your attention.